Hey everyone, it's Jack here, and today I'll be covering World AP History Concept 3.2, known colloquially as a period of continuity and innovation in state forms and interaction. As you can see, there is a picture of the ruins of Machu Picchu, which represents one of the major empires of the post-classical period, the Incan Empire. In this video, I'm going to briefly talk about several empires in the Americas, like the Incan Empire, power structures in Asia, and technological and cultural transfers in several areas around the globe. And if you're asking yourself what caused all this change around the world, it would be the collapse of several empires. So with that, let's hop right into the video. So, due to the collapse of several empires, imperial states were reconstructed in some regions. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the Byzantine Empire and the dynasties of China. So the Byzantines. Geographically, they were located next to the Mediterranean in between Africa and Europe, with the capital of Constantinople founded naturally by Emperor Constantine. Constantine changed Byzantium to Constantinople, and the reason he did this was because it was closer to the richer east and it was his homeland, so obviously that's where we want the capital to be. The Byzantine Empire, in terms of characteristics, had their initial ruler of Constantine, who had absolute military power. The empire was very wealthy due to flourishing trade and high taxes, and notably, despite speaking Greek, the Byzantines considered themselves Roman and even followed Roman law. Eventually, Justinian took over, and while he was in charge, he helped to restore the glory of Rome, building the Hagia Sophia and capturing Carthage. So that's really about it with the eastern parts after Rome separated. But in terms of the West, which I'm not really covering in this video, the Pope was in charge over there. Well, initially they started off pretty weak. Throughout, as the period progressed, the Pope eventually had his own army, and they made allies and became stronger. But anyways, on to China now. So Imperial China. During this period, there were three major dynasties, the Sui, Tang, and Sung in that order. The Sui dynasty was a short dynasty lasting only about 37 years. The dynasty successfully united the nation, and to an extent, the economic and political status of China was advanced. The rule of the dynasty was quite tyrannical, especially under the second of three emperors in this period, Emperor Yang. As we learned with Qin Shi Huangdi, these types of regimes don't tend to last long, which is partially the reason it ended in such a short time period. Unsurprisingly, it was ended by a peasant rebellion. So now let's move on to the Tang, which lasted nearly for 300 years. It was put into place after Li Yuan seized the role of emperor amidst the chaos of the peasant rebellion, which ended the Sui dynasty. There were two glorious periods in this empire, from 627 to 649, and then in 712. Essentially during these times, the economy flourished, trade increased, the social order was stable, and corruption had a minimum effect in politics and the court. A notable person of this time would be Empress Wei, who in 710 was manipulating her husband Zhongzong and ended up being the second woman empress of China until she was killed in a coup shortly after her reign had begun. Now, onto the decline of the Tang. Eventually, after Emperor Zhongzong in the 750s became older and stopped caring about the politics of the state, corruption ensued and over time rebellions were planned. This led to, over the span of 100 years, a gradual decrease in the quality of the emperors until finally in 907, Emperor Ai was forced to abdicate the throne. So in between the Tang and the Sung, there were a couple of minor dynasties that weren't really as important as the three major ones in the post-classical period. But anyways, a couple hundred years later, and then the Sung dynasty came into power. The Sung dynasty started in 960 and ended in 1279. During this time, the economy was prosperous, cultural advances moved on at a fast pace, and the golden age started in the Tang dynasty seemed like it was going to continue. The Sung dynasty can be divided into the Northern Sung and the Southern Sung, with the Northern Sung starting first in 960, but the Southern Sung ending later in 1279. Zhao Kungayin founded the Northern Sung, and through his military conquests he captured Kaifeng, unifying most of China. The Southern Sung was started by Zhao Gao, the son of the last emperor of the Northern Sung. The Sung dynasty was very prosperous through the improvement of agricultural technology, a more complex division of labor, and massive technological and scientific achievements. Examples of technological achievements during this period would be the compass and better utilization of gunpowder. During this time, cultural arts like poetry were quite common, advancing under poets like Shen Kuo. Eventually, the Yuan dynasty or the Mongols ended the Sung dynasty. A quick thing to mention about all the power structures in Eurasia at this time would be how they used strategies from previous governments, like patriarchy and religious motivation. They added new things in like tributary systems and different types of taxes, which hadn't been done before this time. So, now that we've talked about power structures in Asia and Europe, let's move on to North America now. So, imperial rule in the Americas. Let's start out with the Aztecs. They originated most likely as a nomadic tribe in northern Mexico, and around the 13th century arrived in Mesoamerica. The capital was Tenochtitlan near Lake Texcoco. They had a fairly sophisticated agricultural system with artificial islands on the borders of Lake Texcoco, growing maize, beans, squash, and potatoes to be traded at the giant market in Tenochtitlan. They also hunted and fished as well. So onto the empire part of the Aztec culture. Through alliances with nearby peoples, they eliminated their greatest rival in the Tipanuc. This allowed them to rule nearly 6 million people through conquest or commerce. Unfortunately, their lust for warfare led to their eventual demise, as the people they conquered didn't enjoy, well, being conquered. So when the Spanish came, led by Hernan Cortez, they were willing to team up and end the Aztec Empire. Now onto the Inca and the Andean Mountains. The Inca civilization was occurring around 1400 and 1533 CE, stretching nearly 2,500 miles. They were great architects, and while I can't get into it too much right now, let's just say they were so advanced in some of their techniques that we can barely duplicate it now. See me after class and I'll tell you about it. The Inca conquered many civilizations in the Andes and used taxation systems, specifically the labor-based mita tax on the conquered people. The capital was Cusco, and it was a center of power and of commerce. Throughout the empire, hardy crops like potatoes and various types of corn were common, being grown using terraces and irrigation canals. On to the downfall now. In around 1527, the Inca Empire was full of rebellions while waging a war in Ecuador over a second capital city, Quito. They were also suffering from smallpox, which killed a large percentage of the population. Then, on top of this, Huascar and Atahualpa were battling for control of the empire in a civil war. So then, when Pizarro and the Europeans showed up, conquering the empire was practically handed to them due to these factors, and the Inca fell. So while I've mainly been talking about empires in the Americas, networks of city-states are just as important, demonstrated with the Maya. The Maya began as soon as 2000 BCE in the Yucatan area of Mexico. However, in 250 CE they started to progress on their most notable achievements. They understood their concept of zero, could do complex calculations, and had excellent astronomical knowledge, being able to construct an elaborate calendar. All this nice stuff aside, though, and the Mayan civilization was essentially a war zone. There was no central authority, there was frequent warfare, and rule was dominated by local lords. The city-states competed against each other for resources, territory, and settled any differences they had through fighting. By 900 CE, the whole civilization was essentially gone, divided by warfare, diminishing resources, and potentially famine and disease. With the Americas completed, let's move on to the Muslim caliphates in Asia. So the Umayyad Caliphate. The Umayyad continued the military expansion of previous caliphs and ruled in 661 to 760 CE. Using the Syrian army, the Umayyad created their empire from conquering nearby provinces and eventually moving into India. Notably, they attacked Constantinople and nearly conquered it on multiple occasions. The Syrian army was defeated by the Byzantines in 717, and this defeat led to the eventual overthrow in 750 by the Abbasids. Still, this represented a new political entity in this region in the Islamic Empire. For my final topic of the video, let's talk about technological transfer during the post-classical period. So between the Abbasids and Tang China, there was a fair amount of commerce. Tang China traded gunpowder to the Abbasids, which would end up being a major event due to advanced weaponry. Arab merchants also spread their wares into China, bringing their cuisine, musical instruments, and medical knowledge into China. So now on to the Mongols, the omnipresent exception. The Mongols had control of the Silk Roads, and through it they spread Islamic mathematics into China. They also transferred grapes and fruit trees into China, while distributing gunpowder through their empire. Now, to cover Chinese maritime activity. It was post the reign of the Mongols, and essentially China used it for their tribute system. The system had other people give China cool goodies, and then China would trade with them. During this time, they used the compass and new and more technologically advanced and larger ships. Lots of this maritime activity was led by Zheng He. So to briefly review, we covered empires in the Americas, power structures in Asia, and technological and cultural transfers throughout Asia, all of which are summarized in Concept 3.2. So that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed this review. Maybe it will help you out for the AP exam. Until next time, this is Jack from WHAP Jack signing off. See ya.